Before we get started, I want to share with you something that we are extremely excited about here at This Week in Health IT, and that is Clip Notes. Clip Notes is the fastest growing email list that we've ever put together. If you can't listen to every show, but you want to know who was on and what was said, the best thing to do is to sign up for Clip Notes. One paragraph summary, key moments in bullet point format with timestamps, and 1 to 4 video clips from the show. It's a great way for you to stay current, share insights with your team, and maintain your commitment to their development during these extraordinary times. The best way to sign up, the easiest way to sign up is to just send an email to clipnotes, CLIPNOTES, at thisweekinhealthit.com, and it'll kick off an automated workflow. You'll get an email back from me. Click on that link, and you are off to the races. So don't delay. Send that email. Get signed up today. Now on to the show. Welcome to This Week in Health IT. It's Tuesday News Day, where we look at the news which will impact health IT. Today, Drex DeFord is in the house to discuss the news, and I know you guys look forward to that, and so we're going to do a little back and forth. It should be fun. My name is Bill Russell, healthcare CIO coach and creator of This Week in Health IT, a set of podcasts, videos, and collaboration events dedicated to developing the next generation of health leaders. This episode and every episode since we started the COVID-19 series has been sponsored by Sirius Healthcare. Now we're exiting the series, and Sirius has stepped up to be a weekly sponsor of the show through the end of the year. Special thanks to Sirius for supporting the show's efforts. All right. Hey, good morning, Drex. Welcome back to the show.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me. You got to love those Sirius guys for continuing to
they're fantastic. And
put wood on the fire, right?
Yep. And I'm going to be hosting one of their healthcare events coming up here shortly. I'm going to be moderating, emceeing, I think is what they said. I don't know what the difference between a moderator, an MC, or a speaker. I think an MC is somebody when you don't really want them to speak, but you just want them there. I don't know.
No, I think MC requires you to tell jokes. I'm pretty sure you have to have some jokes.
Oh man, my kids are just cringing right now. If that's
I'll work
really
with you on that. Whip
really
out some dad jokes right in the middle of the audience. It'll be fine.
Hey, you know what? Every now and then, I for the news show, I usually give a shout out to 3X Drex. And how did you come up with 3X Drex? Why did you come up with 3X Drex?
That's a very interesting question. So I should be at Burning Man right now, but it was canceled. Last year at Burning Man, I happened to run into somebody that I knew who said, I follow you on LinkedIn. You post really good stories. Whatever you post, I always read that and I avoid everything else. And it's like you're giving me some curated content. And so I sort of thought about that. It was one of those things that was in the back of my mind the rest of the week while I was there. And when I came back, I started thinking about why doesn't somebody do something by text? Because it's limited to 1,600 characters. You can't overwhelm anybody. Maybe it's 1 or 2 or maybe 3 stories. And you just talk about the stuff that, is the big stuff to you, the stuff that you find most interesting or most important. And that turned into figuring out how to do text-based blast and signing people up. And it started with 2 or 3 or 4, and we're just keep growing and keep growing. And so that's a story. It was born of Burning Man and keeps on going.
I gotta love every answer that starts with, I should be at Burning Man right now. And the whole concept happened at Burning Man, to which there's 15 follow-up questions that I'm not going to ask. But it is a great service. I love that you can just click on them. Easy for me to pull them up. Then I just file stories away to talk about. And the good news is,
Thanks.
You found them for me. I don't have to go find them, which is wonderful.
I think I have time right now. I have a bunch of feeds from a bunch of different places. So I read tons of stories, and I really do try to just figure out, this is one that's probably the most interesting, or these are the 2 or 3 that are most interesting today. Those are the ones I'll punch out. And then sometimes I find something that's oddball or weird or interesting, and I'll do that as a bonus post. But yeah, sign up. It's really easy. Text the keyword Drex, DREX, to 484848, and we'll start hitting you with 3 text messages a week and pretty easy reads.
Cool. Drex, the best radio name for people who don't know what radio is. It's like the precursor to podcast. Anyway, Drex, though, man, that is such a great name. I wish Bill is just not quite the name that really gets it going for. I need a new radio personality name. That's what we'll do. Start sending me Bill at thisweekinhealthit.com. I'm going to
Renames.
I'm going to get a new name. That's going to be my radio personality name. Feel free to send me some ideas.
You need a handle, right? Like a UFC fighter. So it could be Bill something, and then we'll get an announcer. Maybe I'll do it. Come on and do like a UFC kind of announcement.
Yeah, and that's
step into the ring.
This probably shows how old I am. I'm thinking of like George the Animal Steel, Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Right.
These were the professional wrestlers back when I was a
sure professional wrestling introduction. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Same thing.
All right, tune in for this. Although I don't know, maybe they did. Here's what we're going to do. We started something new a couple weeks back. We just hit the headlines on a couple of things real quick, and then we go a little deeper into some of the stories that are out there. First thing, let's take a look. People have been busy. Amazon launched a new wearable, I think is interesting. The modern healthcare story is that Sharp Healthcare first to deploy Amazon's new health wearable. There's a couple stories out there on this. Let me see if I can find the other one. So they had to be working with Sharp. I would assume they had to be working with Sharp ahead of launching this, wouldn't you think, in order for them to announce and be at Sharp already?
Yeah, as part of the sort of the scoop of the product, you would think so. They have some kind of a relationship that they've built in advance of this. And whether it's around specifically the wearable or something else, it's definitely an early adopter program, an innovation program of some kind. It'd be interesting to dive in and find out the details on that. But they must have been tied in.
Yeah, let me give you a couple of the details on Amazon unveils Halo to battle Apple Watch and Fitbit. Tracks activity, body fat, emotions. Amazon has introduced a new wristband. You got that. It brings new offerings, including technology to track people's body fat. Anyway, it's just a recap here. Amazon's first significant move into wearables, which Gartner estimates will be a $52 billion market this year alone. Are there really that many wearables? I guess if you're putting the Apple Watch into that category, you're putting the Fitbit into that category, and then there's just a whole host of other things that fall into the wearable category, like some clothes and some other stuff.
This one was interesting. I think I remember seeing something maybe this morning or last night about how it records temperature. And if that's the case, there were some really interesting reports early on in the COVID outbreak where people were taking their temperature with smart thermometers, and based on the geolocating data that they could do with those temperatures, they were able to, unfortunately it was after the fact, but go back and look and say, wow, yeah, we could have maybe predicted the outbreak in New York because a lot of people were taking their temperatures and their temperatures were elevated, and maybe that's correlated. So I find that interesting because if people shared data and that became a public health resource, maybe it's another thing that could help predict pandemic outbreaks or new blooms of COVID or something.
Yeah, and that's the promise of wearables. Here's a good article on this. Becker's Hospital Review did a good article. 6 details you need to know. The Halo Band, advanced sensors, as you would guess, and temperature, heart rate, sleep, fitness activity. It's also equipped with 2 microphones. Interesting. We can talk about privacy on that, which can be turned on or off at the user's discretion. I'm sure by default they're on, to analyze energy and positivity in their voice. That's new. Halo's, that's interesting to me. I guess that's how they're getting moods and
right.
Yeah, and it's an important part of health. So that's probably something. That's
back in our day, we just had mood rings, right? Where you put them on and they turned purple, and you were
until you had them for a while. In which case, they were black at all times.
They all turned
black. Who knows what was in there? The Halo Band's tone feature aims to help users understand how their voice may sound to others. For example, tone may identify that a difficult work call leads to less positivity and communication with a customer's family. Again, this is interesting. They're listening into our conversations. So there's going to be, do you want them, allow them to do that? And if you don't, you miss out on some of the core capabilities of this thing, which sounds interesting. The other thing that's interesting on this, it seems like Amazon's really using their expertise in voice. They've collected a lot of just experience.
Alexa and, yeah, it makes me So from a funny perspective, it makes you wonder if you sound very aggressive right now. Would you like for me to turn on all caps for your tweet? And maybe there's a connection there, but maybe not. But it might be something that gives you a little buzz and says, you're sounds like you're irritated. Would you like to do a breathing exercise or, something like that? I wonder how they're going to connect all this and make it useful to a person. I know that some applications now will run a microphone and listen to the sound around you to give you some feedback on you are in a really noisy environment and you need to use hearing protection at this point. But it's interesting to see how it's going to work with mood.
Yeah, this is the reason I'm smiling and laughing is because you could actually, put this on a whole bunch of people's arms, and as they're speaking in a meeting, I can see it saying, "It's time for you to shut up. It's time for you to step out of this meeting. You're saying too many dumb things. You're going to get fired." That kind of stuff. Because I've been in those meetings where somebody's talking, and I'm like, "Oh man, you should stop talking right now. It's so obvious you're angry, and this is not the place."
You want to kick them under the table or something, try to send them some kind of a sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
Throw them a life preserver, but yeah.
I'll tell you, here's what I like about it. Halo's integrated with Cerner at this point, and there's also this labs feature, which are health challenges, experiments, and workouts designed to help users build healthier habits, such as improving sleep quality and finding more effective workouts. The beautiful thing about the Apple Watch and the beautiful thing about Apple is it is a walled garden. The awful thing about Apple is it is a walled garden. And I like this. It seems like they're putting in a little opportunity for you and I to create habits together, or a family to create habits together. I also like that this is not me too. It is going to have a lot of the same sensors and those kind of things, but it's interesting what they've done with voice and some other things. If I were I'm curious your take. If you were a CIO, are you still looking pretty closely at some of these devices?
I think I would probably think of this in the context of what's my long-term strategy around care at home and remote care and those kinds of things. Are there ways that this ties into giving us another piece of data that might be useful for our clinicians? So there's a lot of clinician collaboration that has to happen around this, I think, to really understand what's useful and what's interesting. Because you and I both know when you talk to clinicians about EHRs today, a lot of them continue to say that there's so much data that it's overwhelming and it doesn't give them the things that they really want, but it's hard to say what those are sometimes from patient to patient. More information out of context isn't necessarily better. I think it will take a lot of collaboration to really understand how these things are going to play into helping physicians or clinicians in general do their work more effectively. I think there'll be pockets of things they'll figure out, but that's how a lot of this stuff works. It's little experiments, things turn into a routine, that becomes something that everybody does, and then we continue to expand from there.
All right, so here's one that's more close to home. Ascension to lay off 223 IT workers in Michigan. So this isn't just healthcare workers in general. This is specifically IT workers. And the short snippet here is Ascension Technologies, the St. Louis-based hospital giant information technology services arm, outsource network operations and service desk jobs as part of its digital transformation efforts. Interesting. When we talk about digital transformation, a lot of times we're talking about tools and the ability to take in this information from sensors and to take that sensors and funnel it through another layer so that we could create meaning and context for the clinicians. And so we're talking about all the fun things, but there's also an aspect of greater efficiency that comes with digital transformation that can lead to reductions in the IT staff. Is it disingenuous to not, if you're the CIO, to not be talking about this potential? I'm going to give you the hard questions instead of trying to answer them myself.
Yeah, no, we've talked about some of these things before. My brain works in Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of way. And so when I look at some of this stuff and they tell me that they're outsourcing network operations, what else did you say?
A service desk.
Service desk. So these aren't super surprising. There are a lot of companies today that do service desk for health systems. There are a lot of companies today that will provide network operations as a service for health systems or other organizations. These are things that are absolutely necessary to run. You have to run them well to be able to do the things that are higher on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you want to do business intelligence or other things, the network has to run really well. The power has to stay on in the data center. All those things have to work really well. And if you're having a hard time hiring good people to do that and running it really well, because maybe where you are geographically, or maybe healthcare isn't the most exciting place in the world for some of these people to work, then I think you have to be looking all the time at what are the things with the right structure of a contract and support and SLAs and everything else. What are the things that I could outsource so that I could refocus my energy on the things that are really unique and hard and different about healthcare that we really want to do. So I think the things on the lower end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for healthcare IT probably get looked at pretty regularly and should.
Yeah, I did a monthly town hall, and I was asked this question all the time. I would say at least 9 out of the 12 town halls that I did, are there going to be reductions? Are you those kinds of things? And that's a difficult question to answer, and you can never answer absolutely positively no, because COVID could hit. You have no idea what's going to come down the pike. But the other thing about it, I always used to say is, I'll make a commitment to you. Every day you're here, I will make you more valuable. I will give you opportunities to learn. I'll give you opportunities to do things. That's my commitment. I'm not guaranteeing you a job, but I'm guaranteeing you will be more valuable for having worked at this organization. But the next thing I would invariably talk about is some aspect where I say, look, 3 years ago, we used to provision servers. And when we did that, we would go online on a Dell website. We'd order servers. The servers would arrive. Somebody would unpack them. Somebody would take them into the data center. We would then coordinate the activity to actually put it in there. And then we'd bring in a different networking person who would connect up the networking and do all those things. And that's before we even installed the operating system or had anybody come on and define the VPN, the routes, and all that other stuff that needed to be done in order for that to be to happen. And then I pick up my phone and I go, I can now provision an entire data center from this phone in the next 3 minutes. Literally, I could go on and provision as much compute and storage as we have downstairs in our core data center with a credit card in a couple of minutes. Yeah. And it didn't require me to go online ordering. So if I can do that, shouldn't that be the model for this organization if we were about the answer is yes, that should be the direction we're going. And I say, okay, if that's the direction we're going, do we still need a data center? Do we still need somebody to clean below the floors? Do we still need somebody shipping and receiving for that stuff? While I was at CIO at St. Joe's, we emptied this massive room of parts.
Yeah.
I walked in, I was like, what is all this stuff? They're like, this is parts in case something breaks.
Parts. Yeah.
Like, wow, it was a big room. It represented hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, an inventory management system, a person dedicated to it. And I walked out of that room. I looked at my CFO for the IT organization. I'm like, okay, we're getting rid of that room. And everything it represents, we're getting rid of it.
Yeah. I think you're always going to be looking for efficiencies, and you should always be looking for efficiencies. And you should tell your team that it's part of your expectation that they will always be looking for efficiencies. And you'll do the best to not make that turn into something where somebody loses their job. We'll do our best if somebody loses a job to try to figure out another place for you, or a way to retrain you, or a way to use you in a different way in the department. But efficiencies are how we are going to continue to be able to do more with less. You do more with less, not by working harder, but by finding waste and taking it out of the process, by finding efficiencies and implementing those efficiencies as a way to do your work better. And it is a thing that I think, like you said, you have to be really careful about ever saying, I promise that we'll never lay you off and that you'll always have a job, because you just don't know what's going to happen. Tomorrow, something crazy could happen and we could change computing forever. It could change what we do forever. So you can't really make that promise. Yep. But I love what you've said. I'll always work. My promise to you is that I'll always make you better than you are. I'll work to make you more valuable, either to me or to someplace else. And if you have to go someplace else, that's also something that I'll do very graciously. I'll help you make that transition if you need to.
And the best people to work for, by the way, is just watch when they have to do, because every organization has to do cuts at some point. Watch how they do it. If it's just a day event where, hey, people came in, they were told, they were let go, they walked out with a box, that doesn't say much for the organization. But if they go out of their way to write references, to make phone calls, to make connections, to utilize their network on your behalf, that's probably an organization you want to be a part of, because it just communicates a better culture. They care about the people while they're at the organization and beyond, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
Rapid $5 coronavirus test doesn't need specialty equipment. So Abbott Labs came out with a $5 15-minute test for coronavirus. This is a significant move. And actually, I'll talk about this in the context because you're one of the people I'd want to talk to about this. Let's see. So NPR.
I don't know, though. For $5, do I get a Subway sandwich or do I want a coronavirus test?
I don't know.
$5 so long? Yeah.
So my wife called me today. She goes, "Hey, you should cover this on your show." I was like, "All right, give me the storyline." And it was an NPR story. So I went out, and it's if you hit the NPR website, you can actually listen to the story. And they have a reporter at the University of Missouri and a reporter at the University of Illinois. And they talked about how colleges and universities are handling this differently. So the University of Illinois has mandatory testing, and it's a saliva-based test that they developed at University of Illinois Urbana, because smart people go there and work there, and they developed this test. They administer 10,000 tests per day on the campus. They had 300 positive cases when people came back, and they said they anticipated that. They thought that was going to happen. There's people that didn't know they had it. There's people, 300 out of, I don't have the total number of students, but I would imagine it's a state college, tens of thousands. So that's probably a pretty good percentage. Yeah. 70% of their classes are online. So here's what they did. You're required to test before you come back on site. You're required to test during the day. And the reason this is a technology project is because they're implementing a health passport. Okay, so you can have the test results on your phone, or you can have a piece of paper, not as techy as we would like. But essentially, you have to show that before going to class. It's a health passport, which I think is interesting. So the second, they talked to the University of Missouri. No mandated testing to come back on site. No testing. You can get a test if you have any symptoms while you're at the university. They're doing in-person classes for freshmen, and a lot of the other classes are online, but a majority of the freshman classes are in person. The people, and what's interesting is they interviewed people at both universities. They interviewed people at the university, or a student at the University of Illinois, and she's like, "I don't mind the lines. This is great. I know that the person sitting next to me doesn't have COVID." They interviewed a person at the University of Missouri, and they're like, "Hey, I appreciate I'm getting the full college experience and those kind of things." I almost don't want to comment on this because this will get us into a really gray area. But I thought it was fascinating that the different approach, and my daughter goes to college right now. I had to decide whether I was going to send her back. And I think it's fascinating, these colleges. I think you could tell which ones have academic medical centers. You could tell which ones are partnered really well with the healthcare community. My daughter's university is really well connected. She goes to Baylor, great academic medical center. They partnered. They did a lot of great stuff. And I've talked to her a couple times now, and she feels really relatively safe on site. They're wearing masks everywhere. University of Illinois, they're wearing masks everywhere. I didn't pick up the University of Missouri if they're wearing it or not. But this is an interesting. I just thought it was an interesting story. I don't. If you want to comment, go ahead. But if it gets too political, I'm going to throw up my hands.
Okay. You and I have had a little bit of this debate online on LinkedIn, along with several other people who have commented on some stuff that you have posted about this on LinkedIn. So I actually really like the idea of being able to do, part of this is ultimately not just being able to do a test, but it's, do you have a whole infrastructure program in place to do contact tracing and everything else? And if you don't, then one part of it's one leg of a stool. If the stool only has one leg and not the other two, it's going to fall over. So all of that sort of has to be taken in context. But if you do have a comprehensive program at the university, then you also have to look and see, do you have a comprehensive program in the community? Because it's probably unreasonable to expect that those kids are only going to stay on campus and they're not going to interact with anybody from off campus. And that also then gets to other issues like, is the health system in that community already overwhelmed with COVID cases and other things? Then maybe those schools shouldn't be back in session until things get squared away. So some of it's common sense. I love the idea of having some kind of a passport on the phone. I get tested every 3 days and it's updated on my phone. And I'm working with an early stage company right now who's doing something like that right now that would allow you to do things like show up at a football game and say, oh, I can show that I've been tested, so I can bypass the line that's the temperature check and the question set and all of that. I get the, fast lane.
A TSA for football games. Is that what you're telling me?
Or other thing that people would wind up going to class. You could show your code, walk right in, or you don't have a code. You have to get the temperature check and the question set and set in a different part of the room or something like that. There's probably 100 ways to skin this cat, but yeah, it's definitely been a big topic of conversation about going back to school, going back to university.
Yeah, I hope nobody's developing a health passport app. It makes no sense. We could just put it in an Apple Wallet or whatever Android's thing. If I can put my movie tickets, my plane tickets, and everything else, I can put my health passport in there. And so I just hope no one's spending millions of dollars pursuing a health passport specific, unless they have ideas for how it's going to expand. But, I just find that's interesting. The article that you and I disagreed on, if people are wondering, so I now I take one of the stories we're going to talk about, I post it out on LinkedIn every day. I put a little commentary. And right now they're getting a lot of back and forth. In fact, I'm going to go over here. The one you and I disagreed on was, I think, the school one or the contract tracing one. One of the two.
I don't know.
I think it was.
So for everybody who's listening right now, I know sometimes you think Bill and I agree on everything, but that really turns out not to be the case, which is actually why I love the guy. We get to talk and debate about a lot of stuff, and we do it reasonably. There's never any shouting or hand waving.
You're left of center. I'm right of center. I happen to be an environmentalist who's right of center. I don't know if that even makes sense to people, but
yeah, no.
But anyway, so I put the thing out on contact tracing. You and I went into deep dive into contact tracing a while back, but there's still a lot of back and forth of other countries have done this and they've done it big time. And I've seen some CIOs saying, hey, we're doing this across our campus. But generally speaking, bringing the patients or even a school population of students into it just feels like it's asking a little bit too much for our society right now, or the society in the United States.
We're super suspicious from a privacy perspective in some ways, right? So on this topic, everyone seems to be really concerned that I'm not sure I want somebody tracking where I've been. And even if it's de-identified, will everybody do what they're supposed to do? And if everybody isn't participating, does it really make it worthwhile? And so I'm really skeptical. But we'll use Facebook and Twitter and Amazon Alexa listening on all of our conversations and all of that. We don't seem to have a problem with. So there's some, probably the wrong word, but there's some bipolar problem that we have around privacy when it comes to something like this. I'm like, dude, come on. This could save your life. It could keep you from getting your grandma infected. But people are really skeptical about it. And I understand why.
You know who gave me they asked Bill Gates, why aren't we more effective on the whole response to COVID-19? Why aren't people buying in, those kinds of things? He had a one-word answer. You know what it was? Freedom. He said, this country is more free than other countries. In other countries, you don't have a choice but to do contact tracing. You don't have a choice but to wear a mask. You don't have and in our country, we've been brought up that no one gets to bully you. No one gets to tell you what to do. And unfortunately, that stuff equates to, hey, you have to wear a mask. No one gets to tell me what to do. Wait a minute. There's a rational argument here for wearing a mask and protecting each other and those kind of things. But there's just this knee jerk of freedom. We were taught, what was the old thing? Don't tread on me. Actually, they had those Revolutionary War flags. It's like, yeah, my rights are my rights. It was an interesting article.
I get that.
All right. Anything else on that? The other thing I put the CDC, I talked about last week, the change from HHS to CDC. I don't really want to talk about that anymore, but it did remind me of that Saturday Night Live skit. Remember where they used to have Rosanna Dana? And she would go off on something and be really adamant on something. And then somebody would say, Roseanne, she'd have a word wrong or something. They said, Roseanne, it's actually this. And she'd go, oh, never mind.
Never mind.
And that's what it felt like. It felt like they were like, we're going to do this. This is going to be good. We should do this. And then all of a sudden they just go, we were wrong. Never mind. Back to what we were doing.
It's definitely, it continues to be interesting to watch watch what happens between the CDC and HHS. It's the classic right hand, left hand challenge, and even the issue of they'll issue guidance. The CDC will issue guidance, and then even the CDC will come back the next day and say, never mind. We didn't mean it like that. Yeah. And so it makes it hard, right? It creates a general purpose trust problem that I think makes the figuring out how to deal with the pandemic even harder.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You need clarity to address a problem. You need clarity, and it's welcome to have clarity. I'm curious on this. Google Cloud, Amwell coming together.
Oh yeah,
$100 million investment, and they're going public. Are you worried at all with Google? We talk about the surveillance, economy that exists. I think people are just ignorant of the amount of surveillance that is actually going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we say, hey, we're gonna track you for COVID, they're like, no, you don't get to track me. It's like, you realize if you're carrying an Android phone, you're being tracked every which way but Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you see these stories that sort of show, here's where all the cell phones that were located at the Sturgis motorcycle rally went to after they left Sturgis. Now, none of those people consented to be monitored on their cell phones and where they're going, but it happens, and it's de-identified, and it's publicly available, and you can go look at it. Yeah, you're exactly right. We're being monitored all the time. There are folks always tracking us. They may not really know who we are, but we're being tracked.
So what's Google's? I want to ask you that question because you have no idea what's in their mind here. But does the privacy aspect concern you at all? Google has the deal with Ascension, the deal with Mayo, and they have the deal with Amwell. They just did a deal. Verily did a deal. I saw in the news on stop loss insurance as well. So Google's making their bets.
Oh, yeah.
They're making their plays right now. Are you worried about that privacy aspect as Google starts to step in? Would you like to see more from them in terms of I wouldn't mind if Google themselves came out with a patient bill of rights that said, we won't use your information in this way. We will only use it in this way. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for all of the companies, and honestly, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Microsoft or Google or Amazon or, whoever, transparency is probably most important. Being readily able to and willing to answer questions about how you're using the data that you're getting, and having those conversations turned into, like you said, a bill of rights or clear places where you draw a line and say you can't use it like that. Because a lot of people are getting data put into these big data machines, these big data companies, and they don't really know where it's going or how it's being used. And they're trusting that it's being de-identified. We're not totally sure, which means in a lot of ways you're operating in the blind. And as a consumer, you don't know where your data is going and what it's being used for. I think it's interesting to see Google and Amwell come together. There's a little bit of a hurry up and get in the telemedicine game while it's hot issue. And then I don't know if you saw the article from C.T. Lin at the CMIO at the University of Colorado Health recently did a blog post, but he talked about how telemedicine skyrocketed, and then now it's trailed back off, and they've gone from 100 visits a week to something like 8,000 visits a week. That's where they are now. But in-person, in-clinic visits are back to sort of 95% of where they were. So overall, they're seeing more patients and maybe more efficiently because they're using telemedicine for some of that. But the idea that telemedicine was going to change everything, I still think we're on a slow plodding course to get to the point where as much stuff as we can do by telemedicine, we will do virtually. But it's interesting to see from his notes and his diagrams that like things really turned around for them. They still do a lot of telemedicine visits, but in-person visits went right back to where they were pre-COVID.
Yeah. So here's my take on telemedicine at this point. It is going to snap back. There's no doubt it's going to snap back because you just have to follow the money, and that will dictate that people are going to come back into the office. They're going to get higher reimbursements and those kind of things. And generally speaking, if a doctor says, "Hey, come into my office," you're going to go into their office. That's one aspect. But the thing that is, the expectations have changed, so the consumers are more readily open to telehealth. So if you would have said 6 months ago to people, "Hey, we want to see you via telehealth," they'd be like, I don't know. But now almost everyone has experienced it, and they're like,
that wasn't bad.
And so if you now some people messed it up a little bit, and the first impression wasn't that good. That's bad. Some people, the scheduling was a little off and whatnot. We threw some things together, but generally speaking, not that bad. So there's going to be things where they go, "Hey, you know what? For my follow-up visit, more than happy." Or for a visit where, "Hey, I already know I'm sick. I just need you to prescribe something. You want to do a telehealth visit? Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that." So I think that's going to be one aspect. The other thing is the health systems that really are starting to think through where video and virtual care start to bake in, and there's a bunch of them. There's a lot of conversation going on in this. Where is virtual care going to be baked into our normal care processes and whatnot? They're going to position themselves for the future. And there is going to be this future of age in place, out of the home, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of conversation going on there. And then quite frankly, I think there's an opportunity for significant efficiencies to the health system that brings their smart people together and starts to look at where they can insert video between clinicians and consults and things that maybe
rounding
that weren't that they were forced to do in COVID. Maybe they can step back and say, "Hey, you know what? That actually worked pretty good for us."
A lot of that is like in-house telemedicine sort of stuff. When it came to things like rounds where somebody just couldn't be there physically, but they brought them in by video because, that the doc had some pre-existing, condition and didn't want to be in the hospital, but was able to be on rounds using a cow or something like that. A lot of those things going in, preserving PPE by being able to do a tele-ICU thing with a patient as opposed to putting all the gear on and going in to do one little thing and then coming out and having to trash all the gear that you just put on. All those things turn out to be like really good habits, and probably good for the patient too. And definitely in some cases protects the clinicians. So there's a lot of, we learned a lot of stuff, I think, and we're still learning a lot of stuff that we shouldn't throw out. We should keep leveraging these ideas.
So one of, you're my cybersecurity guy. You're one of my cybersecurity guys. So I love this story. So I highlighted it today. It's probably the one that got the biggest uptake of all the stories I've done over the last 2 weeks. And it is based on Tesla. There's a Tesla employee that was offered $1 million to implant malware. And instead of doing it, he actually worked with the FBI to thwart the cyber attack. And I just posed this question. If I had $1 million in some malware, could I entice someone at your company to insert the code to gain access to critical information? And I guess my question to you, cybersecurity expert, is how worried do we need to be about internal attacks, about our employees being, I don't know, being coerced in some way to plant malware or ransomware or those kind of things? Is that a common thing?
I think in a nutshell, in its simplest form, that's what phishing is, that you send somebody an email and you ask them something, you give them some piece of information that they're really interested in, and they click on a link and they accidentally install malware, and you're not even paying them for it. You're giving them something that they think they want, and then they accidentally misstep. I think we saw it with the Twitter breach a month or so ago, where the kid from Florida went in and had some kind of conversation with a Twitter employee who had some kind of super user access to Twitter accounts, and he gave up the username and password or something, and suddenly the Bitcoin kid was out there posting under all kinds of celebrities' names, hey, send me $1,000 in Bitcoin and I'll send you $10,000 back. And he rounded up a lot of Bitcoin cash. So I think if you have employees who will do it accidentally, there's certainly the possibility that you have employees that would do it for payment. It's probably just a matter of what's the number. And then the individual, I don't know, this is like everything else, right? People are just doing some kind of calculation in their head about the risk of being caught, the amount of damage that it might actually do if they took part in it, and how much do they want $1 million. But yeah, I think the risk is there. And it's something we have to look out for all the time.
So it's probably not common that somebody's going to knock on your door and say, let's go out for lunch, and I'm willing to give you money to put this malware in it, because it's just as easy at this point to get you to click on an email.
Figure out another way to do it. Yeah. This is the problem with these kind of cyber crimes, is that once you bring one more person into it or two more people into it, you're way more likely to be caught. So if you can figure out how to maintain your anonymity and get somebody to do it accidentally, then your odds of being caught are very slim. But if you've got to pay somebody for it, now that's another person that's in the conspiracy. And once they're caught,
we're not trying to train the hackers here. No.
Bring
as people in as you can.
I think this is I have a friend at CI Security who does a Facebook Live every week, and the same conversation comes up when we may be talking about things. There are times where I'm just, oh man, don't say that out loud, because bad guys are listening. His opinion about this, he's a CISO, is that anything that I've thought of, there's tons of people that have already thought of it. So even if you think it's a genius idea and nobody's come up with it, people have come up with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Got to stay one step ahead.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks again for hosting the show a couple of weeks back. Appreciate it. Gave me a week
for sure.
off.
That was great fun.
And the ratings were so good, I'm thinking of having you do it every week. You have a real job.
Okay. I'm sure we can figure something out. But it was great fun. I appreciate you entrusting the brand to me for a week, because I surely could have wrecked it, but fortunately I didn't.
It's a recorded show, so you couldn't have wrecked it too much.
You're going to review it before it goes out anyway.
And I was on vacation, but my staff wasn't, so they still reviewed all this stuff. I do trust you, Drex. I'm just saying.
I know.
There were some checks and balances in place. So anyway, hey, thanks again for stopping in this week. We didn't really get to dive into anything too deep, but it's always fun to just go through the headlines with you and see what's going on in health IT.
Yeah, I get a kick out of it. Thanks. And anytime, I'm happy to come on.
Fantastic. All right, that's all for this week. Don't forget to sign up for Clip Notes. Send an email to clipnotes@thisweekinhealthit.com. Easiest way to do it. Special thanks to our channel sponsors, VMware Starbridge Advisors, Galen Healthcare, Health Lyrics, Sirius Healthcare, ProTalent Advisors, and Health Next. We're choosing to invest in developing the next generation of health leaders. This show is a production of This Week in Health IT. For more great content, check out the website, thisweekhealth.com, or the YouTube channel. If you want to support the show, if you're still listening, you're a fan of the show. So if you want to support the show, the best way to do that, share it with a peer. Another way, sign up for Clip Notes, get it forwarded to you, forward it on to somebody else and say, I'm listening to the show, get a lot out of it. You're gonna really, this Drex guy, he has a lot of good things to say. And he's on every now and then. So please check back every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday for more great content. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.